Good morning, everyone. It's Wednesday, and today we have a new packet and a new unit to start. Before we talk about anything on today's tasks, I just want to give you a reminder that the last couple days, Monday and Tuesday, there was 2 assignments that you needed to complete and turn in. If you are still a little bit behind and you have not turned in Unit 6 quiz and Unit 6 packet yet, it's not a big deal that it's late. I just want to give you a reminder that you need to turn it in as soon as possible so that you don't dig yourself into a hole of things being behind and late. So try to catch up on that as soon as you can if you still need to complete those. All right, so let's look at today. We have a new packet, which you need to have open at this point. If you don't, the packet is assigned on the post below this one that you're getting the screencast from. So this unit is called Renaissance and Reformation. And today we're going to go over pages 1 and 2, which gives us a little introduction and goes over what the definition of Renaissance is. So let's hop over to our packet. Here's our lovely cover page, Renaissance and Reformation. We'll learn about how the Reformation also is kind of known as the Protestant Reformation. A lot of you guys probably have heard that word before, Protestant. If anybody is Christian or knows anybody who, friends of yours or family members that identify as a Protestant, they could be Baptist, they could be evangelical, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of different divisions of Christianity that kind of fall under Protestant. And this event in history is what forms all those different versions of Christianity. We will also see a major invention, what I probably consider one of the most epic and important inventions of all time, the printing press, and how that spurs and helps spread a lot of the ideas and concepts that are happening during these time periods of the Renaissance and Reformation. We will also see a couple of key people, especially this fellow here. We'll see who he is and what he is doing, nailing documents to the door that everybody needs to pay attention to. So before we go away from this cover page, please take a second to type in your name and your class period. And one other thing I want to mention about the way I made this Google Doc packet this time. A lot of people have been using my absentee slides to just copy and paste my responses and examples of the answers into these spaces. And that is okay for many of the questions. But as far as keeping the format of your packet intact so that things don't get thrown all out of whack and stuff gets put onto the wrong page and you can't understand it and follow it that way, what a lot of people are doing are they are copying and pasting from the slide right into this box without changing the font or changing the size or anything like that, and it throws stuff all out of whack. So if you're doing that and you're behind on stuff and you're using those absentee slides to copy and paste, it's not the best way to learn, but if you are doing it to catch up, it's there for you. However, please change the size so that it stays on the same page. I'm using an 11 font for this Comic Sans font size that I have in here. The other thing that I've also put in here too are page breaks. So if you do fill these boxes in a little bit bigger than what I already have set up here, I tried to give you a little bit of space on the bottom of each page, some pages more than others, and there's a page break that will send you right down to the next page. So this way you can fill in these boxes, and if you go over that size, over that space a little bit, it will fill in this space here without pushing everything else down. Now, if you fill in too much or it's way, way too big and it goes completely off the page, then of course it will push things out of whack. And like I said, you can fix that by just simply changing the font to fit into the size of the box that I have there. So guys, that is my tip for the format. It will help you follow along with what pages and what sections we have. And it also helps me out a lot when I'm looking over and reviewing and grading your packets too. So if I can ask you kindly for a favor that helps me and you, please pay attention to that. Okay, that being said, What was the Renaissance at the top of page 1? Like I said, the first couple pages will give us a breakdown of this term Renaissance. And we're going to complete a couple activities on the next couple pages that clarifies what that means. All right, so let's look at this word breakdown. Renaissance comes from a French word, two different parts that are French. The first is re, which means again. We use this in lots of different words to re-enter the room. You're entering the room again. And naissance, a birth or origination as that of an idea or movement. So the Renaissance, a renaissance, is basically to be born or originate again. It's a rebirth of some kind of movement or idea. And over the next couple of pages, we will see what ideas or movements are being reborn and rediscovered. So let's look at this map for a second. This is called Tracing the Ideas That Led to the Renaissance, Centers of Learning and Innovation in the Mediterranean World. So this map basically gives you a look back into many of the civilizations that we have already studied in the Mediterranean region, going all the way back first to Athens, the city-state of Greece, and the golden age that they experienced. There's also some information about Rome and their golden age called Pax Romana, as well as Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople being the capital. Remember, that is the eastern half civilization of the Roman Empire that came before it. And then also the Abbasid Islamic Empire with Baghdad as its capital. Remember all the Islamic Golden Age achievements, the houses of wisdom that we learned about that were very prosperous and really held on to a lot of the knowledge of the world when Europe was kind of in squalor and having a tough time of it in the dark ages of the medieval European era. So I want you to take a second and pause this video here. I want you to read through these boxes just for a moment so that it will help us answer these questions below. So do that now and come back in just a moment. Okay, so now that you've taken a moment to read through these, I want you to pay attention to the chronology of the dates. That will help us understand the concept here of how the Renaissance started and what kinds of ideas that came before the Renaissance are being reborn and rediscovered. So let's jump over to our slides and we'll answer these three questions together. The Renaissance and Reformation. So what was the Renaissance? Question 1 says, what civilization's ideas were the foundation for collective learning in the Mediterranean world? So when we look at the chronology of these civilizations and the information you just read, the foundation is the key word for this question. Foundation means to look back at the original, the base, what everything else was built up upon and afterwards. So if you look simply at the chronology, the oldest and earliest civilization is Greece, dating all the way back to 480 BCE to 404 BCE, Athens, Greece to be exact. So which civilization's ideas were the base? Well, we read a little bit later that Rome studied and kind of copied a lot of the culture and ideas of Greece. Even a little bit later, the eastern half of the Roman Empire becomes the Byzantine Empire, and they study and preserve a lot of Roman style architecture and culture that also is based off of Greece. So it's like a building block. You first start off with the ancient Greeks, because they were the earliest, and then Rome, the Byzantine Empire, and later even the Abbasid Islamic civilization all studied Greek texts and built upon those cultural elements. For question 2, it's asking to identify 2 examples of innovation described in the chart. So as people and civilizations look back to groups that came before them, they often learn from those designs, learn from those cultures and those achievements, and then they add their own little twist. They add something new to it. But it's a building block. They have to learn from someone else and then add to it first. So that's what we're looking for, innovation. As you look through these boxes, two examples of innovation are: one, the Byzantines studied Roman architecture when constructing their famous projects like the Hagia Sophia Church and the Hippodrome, which was that really long, almost NASCAR-shaped chariot stadium. The second example of innovation is where the Abbasids, the Islamic civilization, collected ancient writings on math and science, and also gained knowledge from Greece, Rome, even China and India in the Far East of Asia. And they used all of this knowledge to make advancements in areas like medicine and astronomy. Remember the videos that we watched on the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, where Ibn al-Haytham designed that dark box projector style that allowed us to develop cameras and understand how the eye worked. Those houses of wisdom sent out basically messages to the rest of the world saying, we want your scholarship. We want people to visit here, to debate ideas, to join in all the learning that had happened in previous areas. And these were big, big centers of learning. This is where the Islamic civilization was able to create, no pun intended, but the title of those videos were 1001 Inventions. Okay, so question number 3. This is a prediction question. This is going to be where you have to think for yourselves for a moment. Based on the dates and information provided in this chart, in this graphic, which civilization's knowledge would most directly influence the start of the Renaissance? And why do you think? So think about this and be careful. This is not a straightforward, easy question. It's probably not the civilization that first comes to mind when you think of the Renaissance. So the Renaissance begins in Italy in the 1300s. That's what this box here is showing us. But before you make your prediction on which civilization's knowledge you think most directly influences this, I want to give you guys just a little guiding tip. Think about which civilization was around at the same time that had collected ancient knowledge that could be reborn into Italy. So if the Renaissance is starting in Italy, there's a rediscovering, a rebirth of some old knowledge into Italy. So think about location, who might be able to trade with who, but also which civilization was around at the same time that could trade and share that knowledge of the ancient world with the medieval Europeans in Italy. Those people who had spent hundreds of years not doing a lot of learning and progressing. They'd gone through the manor system, being isolated on their own little communities. The only education was in the clergy and the priests. Not a lot of people had access to books and knowledge and progress of the ancient times. So think about that for a moment. On the next page, we'll reveal our answer, and you guys can come back and change yours if you don't have it right. All right, so this page gave us a little context, a little historical context for what Renaissance means and where these ideas that are being reborn into Italy might be coming from. So let's clarify this definition and concept a little bit further on page 2. So read along with me. This is our official historical definition. The Renaissance, which means rebirth in French, was a cultural movement in the 14th to 17th centuries during which European artists, scientists, and scholars were inspired by classical achievements of the Greeks and Romans. Remember from the last page, the Greeks were the foundation of the collective learning that happened in all those civilizations in the Mediterranean era, which they became aware of through ruins and Greco-Roman texts that were preserved by Islamic scholars in the Ottoman Empire. So for question 3 up here, take a look at what your prediction was. The Ottoman Empire, which at one point in 1453 took over the capital of Constantinople, and where the Byzantine Empire was, that gateway between Europe and the Middle East, now becomes the Ottoman Empire. And all that Islamic civilization progress and inventions and knowledge starts to trickle its way closer into Europe through that bridge, through that location of Constantinople into the Mediterranean and into Italy. All right, so here's some examples of what we are talking about when we think of the cultural items and ideas that the Renaissance are all about. On the left, we have classical art and architecture from Greco-Roman times, Greek and Roman civilization. On the right, we have Renaissance art and architecture. These kinds of things are being created during the Renaissance eras of the 14th and 17th century. So our first question is, what similarities do you notice between the classical Greco-Roman art and architecture on the left and the Renaissance art and architecture on the right? These are some of the things that are being reborn into Europe, that they're rediscovering. So let's go over to our slide to fill this in. And if you want to take a little closer look and zoom in, I would pause the video here and maybe enlarge or take a little bit of a closer look at what you see in these two pictures. All right, so for question 4, what similarities do we notice when we compare the Greco-Roman art and architecture to Renaissance arts and architecture? The first thing that I see is when I look at the Greco-Roman and Renaissance sculpture art, these figures here, they're both very realistic. They valued and celebrated the perfect form of the human form. Remember, this was something that we had seen in our sculpture exhibits of some of the golden ages, going back to the Athens Golden Age and again in Pax Romana, the Roman Golden Age. It was called realism. They were trying to make their sculptures and make their art pieces with as real and perfect ideology of the human form as they could, with lots of detail sculpted into those pieces. The second thing I notice is in the buildings. The features of Renaissance architecture made use of Greek and Roman features like columns that you see very pronounced in this entryway to this Greek ruins, as well as over here in the kind of porch entryway of this Renaissance period building. There's also domes that they're constructing, which on the Hagia Sophia Church was one of the biggest domes that the Roman era Byzantines constructed. And Brunelleschi's dome, which we'll see a little bit later, is constructed here during the Renaissance period, as well as arches, which you can kind of see very, very small if you zoom in on small parts of the windows up here in this building, as well as down in here. But we know the arches were used for things like the Colosseum and built to hold up the aqueducts as they went across big expanses and rivers that had to, where they had to keep that aqueduct above those gaps using these very strong archways. All right, question 5. Identify one cultural change that you've seen in your lifetime. So the Renaissance is a rebirth. It's a cultural movement. So what I want you to think about here is what kinds of things have happened in the last 10 to 15 years, your lifetime, that you would consider a major cultural change. So consider this. Remember, this is for your response only. This is not something I want you to copy and paste into your packet, because it is not an answer. It's just guiding tips. But consider these things. Think about, how is technology changing the way we do things in the last 10 years? Think about some of the old movies and shows. Talk to your older siblings or your parents. What kinds of technology did they use that's very different from what you're using today? And also think about, are art forms or language different from your parents' generation? So take a moment to respond to that. You can pause the video here if you want. But one thing I am thinking of when I think of a cultural change that I've seen in my lifetime is just the overall use of media, the use of technology and things like social media to experience the culture that is a part of our world. When I'm talking about art form and language, all the literature, the books we read, the articles that we read in the news, as well as the music and art that we, see being made, we experience all that stuff generally through a computer or through a phone or through the internet now. Where when I was born in 1984, I still remember being a little kid in the 80s and seeing, Nintendo and video games come out for the first time. The birth of the internet I experienced, in middle school when you had to dial up on AOL and the internet was really, really slow and loud, but we were sending messages back and forth, without picking up a phone or going over to someone's house. So it was an incredible change about how we communicated and how we interacted with the world around us. But your response can be different than that based on what you have experienced in your lifetime. So question 6 is kind of similar. I want you to think about something from your life that one group of people knew about before another group because of their geographic location. I'll go back to our packet just for a second to explain what this question is getting at. So back up to our map here. We'll learn tomorrow on the next couple of pages why the Renaissance is starting, why it's happening in Italy. But this is a very important location type of question. Italy is at the right time, at the right location to have a rebirth of some of these older ancient ideas, because of where they are located. So there's a lot of cultural things that will happen based on where you are at a certain time. So our packet kind of gives you a little introduction to this question. The Renaissance started in Italy in the 14th century, the 1300s, but its ideas and cultural trends spread slowly across Europe after that. The Renaissance marks the end of the Middle Ages, but the Middle Ages and the Renaissance do kind of overlap, because depending on where in Europe a person was at a given time, the Renaissance, these new ideas, arrived to those different places at different times. So consider this. If you are an Italian in the 1300s, you might start seeing some of these Greco-Roman sculptures and ideas being built into, art forms and buildings. But if you're up here in England or over here in France, it might take you longer to see some of those changes happen because those ideas have to spread. And way back in old times, ideas and communication was a lot slower than it is today. So for question 6, again, this is something that I want you to respond to with your own ideas and your own words. But consider these things. Is there anything from your lives that is exclusively unique to your local region and culture? Or what things can upstate New Yorkers claim ownership of? Is there anything that started, with us in upstate New York and then spread further out to the rest of the country? You can pause here and think about that and respond to that in a second and come back and I'll give you my experience of what I would share here as well. All right, so as you're responding to this question, when I think of something that is exclusively unique to my local or regional culture, I first think of food. So we're from upstate New York. If anyone has been out to Western New York in places like Rochester or Buffalo, and you think about the food items that might be famous for coming from those places, I think about buffalo wings. So chicken wings with like spicy buffalo sauce. That's something that, people enjoy during football games and cookouts, all across the United States. But it was the type of food dish that has started in Buffalo. There's also a food dish that's called a garbage plate, which I ate many a nights studying late in college out in Brockport, which is by Rochester. And a garbage plate is basically just a heap of different combinations of like baked beans, pasta salad, grilled cheese, sometimes hamburger meat with cheese on it, anything you could think of, but you all kind of throw it together on one plate. And those are famous for coming from Rochester. There's another thing that I think upstate New Yorkers can claim that's a little more historic and long lasting. I'm a big sports fan, and I used to love going to different Hall of Fames as a kid. And the closest one to us, which is only about an hour away in Cooperstown, a little bit southwest of us in Albany, is the Hall of Fame for Major League Baseball. And the story goes that Abner Doubleday in Doubleday Field, which is still a baseball field in the city of Cooperstown, created the modern game of baseball in that place. So we, as upstate New Yorkers, can maybe claim, the birth of baseball, which of course is nationwide, our national pastime, and even other countries, especially in Latin American countries, and it's really, really big in Korea and Japan as well. Baseball is experienced and celebrated all across the world. But so the legend goes that New York State in Cooperstown is where it started. So these ideas are giving us a little introduction to the Renaissance. A little bit of what it means, where those ideas or movements are being reborn from and going into. And we have a little sneak peek into some of the characteristics that we'll study later about these new cultural movements that are going to be reborn and practiced again in Europe. So the next couple of pages, we will go over the geographic and historical circumstances that led to the start of the Renaissance in Italy. Basically, what was so important about Italy, what was going on there, and why was their location important for them to be the start of this rebirth. Going back to our schedule real quick, the next couple of days we'll go over a few pages at a time. There will be a screencast video for you guys to watch to help you complete those pages on each day. And at the end of Friday, we will have a short set of review questions just for you to check in with me so I can see how you're learning our new topic. Okay, folks, so that is it for today. If you have any questions, give me an email. But enjoy the sun, as we're supposed to have lots of great weather the rest of the week. Get your work done as quickly and thoroughly as you can so that you can get outside and enjoy some great weather. Have a great day. Stay happy, healthy, and positive. Bye-bye.